guys, it's Josh Rubin here with the latest edition of The Insider. Today is Friday, December 16th. Happy Hanukkah to all those who celebrate. First night of Hanukkah is this weekend. Mark, you are Jewish by osmosis. And,
so like a lot of New Yorkers,
brother.
Yeah.
But it looks like the theme continues with lower volumes but relatively stable prices. And so what are we seeing out there in our Insider Index?
Yeah, so this is kind of interesting, and we saw a move sort of back in September and October into sort of a buyer market territory, and that seems to be settling. That seems to be settling down a bit, and so I think we're going to continue to see that into the new year.
Yeah.
So this edition of The Insider is our 5 predictions for 2023. Let's kick it off. So first of all, I don't know, did you see that article in The Real Deal, Josh, about crime dissuading people from buying in New York City?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a consideration, right? Because people are reading these sensationalist articles about these crazy things happening on the streets of New York and in the subways, and then they're talking about them in places like South Carolina. Somebody came in looking for pied-à-terre and said, "Oh, well, I'm going to go into a rental because my friends are telling me that, now is not the time to buy."
Yeah.
And, in reality, it's kind of like, I remember with the BLM protests in June, making people do all sorts of crazy things in the wake of the pandemic, thinking that New York was over. Every other article and headline was New York is done, it's never coming back, when in reality, you and I know, because we've been here for decades, that New York is the most resilient city on the entire planet.
Yeah, it's so true. And, one of the things that we know to be true is that when the people talk, our politicians actually do something about it eventually. And
some of them do, but others.
Just looking at what happened with Kathy Hochul, our governor.
Hochul?
Yeah, she got a really scary moment there right towards the end of the election period when Lee Zeldin was coming in super strong, and people were like, "Oh my God, he might actually win." And he basically came in on a anti-crime platform, and that was like his one issue. And based on that, he almost got half of the vote. So,
Mark, let's be honest here. During the final weeks of the election, there was a shooting right outside of Lee Zeldin's house. He and his wife were out.
Yeah.
His teenage daughters were home, and there was a bullet that was lodged in their window frame or something crazy like that.
That's right.
They live in the suburbs of Long Island, but nevertheless, when crime is creeping onto your front door in the suburbs where it almost never happens, it tells you that there's something going on here. And
totally unsettling.
Hochul and the Democratic New York State legislature and its bail reform laws are what are putting these criminals right back out on the streets.
You're 100% right about that. Now, there's a big movement to sort of sort out that bail reform issue. But one thing that I have noticed is in the last, call it 45 days, that the police presence on the subway is an entirely different level than it was last summer. So down there during the summer, I was noticing a lot of extremely unsettling incidents, really crazy people down there doing threatening and weird things. And the whole sort of vibe underground this summer was really hostile. And that has changed quite a lot. They're now making announcements on the subway. There are policemen or police people on the platform if you need them. And really, the whole tenor has started to change. So we saw Adams roll out a new proposal, which I think he's going to be enacting, which is just getting crazy people off of the street. Of course, it's like anything where you've got advocates lobbying one way or the other, it's going to be contentious. But if he actually does this, it's going to have a salutary effect on people's perception of crime in the city. So prediction number one, crime is going to recede in 2023. And that is going to have a kind of a halo effect on people's perception. And that should have a good effect on real estate prices.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if you're right, Mark. Giuliani, the one positive that came out of his tenure as mayor was that he got crime right into shape under William Bratton and then Bernie Kerik as police commissioner.
Yeah, he did.
That broken windows philosophy on crime, and Bloomberg continued it, and then the next guy, who is not even worth naming because that's how horrible a mayor he was, basically did away with 15, 20 years worth of positive momentum when it comes to controlling crime. But that said, we're also seeing interesting moves coming out of the Fed this week. Obviously, Powell did the expected 50 basis point increase. And, over the last, say, month or so, we've, as you've heard me say here before, we've seen bad news be interpreted as being good for the broader economy and financial markets, with equities bouncing substantially. A lot of analysts were saying a couple weeks before the Fed meeting that people should sell the rally. And it seems like that's the move that we've seen in the last couple of days since that Fed move. But we're finally seeing bad news actually mean bad news. So, the 30-year mortgage and of course the 10-year bond has moved accordingly. So what do we think?
Yeah. So here's, I think people have been, or certainly earlier in the year, they were highly focused on the 30-year fixed mortgage rate. And when it sort of briefly broke past 7%, you saw a lot of, people throwing their hands in the air, like end of the world, Chicken Little kind of stuff. But I think it's obvious, at least to me, that the 30-year fixed rate has peaked, and we're not going back to the 7 handle in 2023. So that is prediction number 2, that we have already seen peak rates for the 30-year fixed mortgage, and we should see it really settle down into 2023. We've got an inverted yield curve, which means people that the longer term rates are already below short term rates, and that gives you an idea of where that long rate is headed. We're going to see, I would say, a 5 handle in that 30-year fixed, and by the end of 2023. So that's prediction number 2.
Cool. But it's interesting. We're also going to have to fend off a recession. And as I was speaking with a client earlier this morning, Mark, we were talking about the labor market, and he, a very smart guy, senior management consultant at Price Waterhouse, now at a leading multinational bank. He was of the opinion that softening in the labor market was going to be isolated to tech and finance. And I countered that argument by saying that I felt as though tech and finance may in fact be the canary in the coal mine. And of course, the inverted yield curve is just that, for recession. And so we're going to have to see how we navigate what is the upcoming recession. I actually think we dipped our toe into the recession earlier this year when a lot of people were deniers, and we kind of bounced out of it a little bit as far as what the traditional definition is. And I think that with the Fed's continuing its march toward higher rates, we're likely to see us go back into that recessionary environment. And what impact that has on the labor markets probably won't be felt until the second quarter of 23. And it's how we navigate out of that.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And I think you've got your finger on an important pulse here, which is that the risk is really to the downside with respect to recession, right? So everybody's like, did the Fed pull off the Goldilocks just enough?
The proverbial soft landing, right? Yeah.
But if there isn't a soft landing, to your point, they're going to have to drop rates, and guess what's going to happen to their 30-year fix then? We could easily see it in the 4 handle. So, All right, so let's go on to prediction number 3. Prediction number 3 has to do with a couple different things. The first one is this point. Rents have gone up and are at historic highs in the city, and it is becoming intolerable for a lot of people. One of the reasons that is happening is that, frankly, we don't and haven't been for many years building enough housing in this town. In the 421A tax abatement is, ran out of time and it's no longer around. And so for developers, it's uneconomic to develop rental buildings right now of scale. They need to be buying properties at $400 a buildable square foot, and they need tax abatements in order to make this an economic proposition. And without both of those things in place, they're simply not building more rentals or doing the conversions that they should. And as a result, well, rent is up. And that's a big issue for politicians, because when rent gets too high, people vote against the regime. You know what I'm saying? It's like, in the presidential election, we say it's the economy, stupid. In New York City, it's like, it's the rent. And people vote about rent quite a lot here. So you can expect that, and this is our third prediction, that we're going to see a new 421A tax abatement in 2023. And it's going to be broad, and it's going to encourage a lot of low-income, middle-income housing, and that developers are going to leap all over it because the demand is there.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. Obviously, the rental market has turned a corner from its earlier euphoric levels, as we saw earlier in 22. And, people are negotiating some concessions again, and that's likely to continue in 23. So I wouldn't be surprised if you're right. What about, the commercial to residential conversions that we discussed last week?
Yeah, so there's going to be actually Hochul just announced something a couple of days ago that there's going to be a large push on these conversions. I think they're going to be allocating something like $500 million, I think, for this program, and that just goes along with what we were saying last week, that the pressure on New York City to replace those sort of failed, like Class B, Class C commercial properties that are sitting empty, and replace them with what is really in demand, which is residential housing, is at a fever pitch. So you're going to see money pouring into these conversions, like the Silverstein properties that's already allocated $1.5 billion for this program. So it's going to be a major trend. And I think it's time, right? Like if you walk around Midtown, even pre-COVID, it was looking a little long in the tooth, right? You had these kind of crappy street level retail. You had tired looking buildings. It was kind of like, why am I here? And with a influx of new residents, those retail properties will start to be fresh and sexy again. And I think that's going to help a lot with the sort of tenor and feeling and revitalization of the Midtown corridor.
Mark, rounding out our top 5, we're thinking that there's going to be strong institutional interest in multifamily properties. What are we seeing there?
Yeah, so I think people don't really realize that when they think about real estate as an investment vehicle, that the blue chip part of that is multifamily and not commercial. And in fact, when you're seeing it right now, like in commercial, what's happened is if you have a kind of, a aged, kind of tired office building in Midtown, you could lose your anchor tenant, you lose a few other tenants, and all of a sudden your building's like 40% empty, and then you can't pay the debt on your own mortgage. So that sort of property can be very volatile Whereas multifamily, let's say you've got a 100-unit building, you don't have a situation where 40% of your building moves out in January. That is not a thing. And
Right.
as a result, big multifamily properties are really predictable cash flow streams for their owners, and as a result, more of a blue chip asset. So I think looking at globally what's happening, this theater of conflict between Europe and Russia seems to be not settling down. There's new talk about in the actually increase of conflict there, and maybe a new invasion of Kiev. So there's money over there in Europe looking for a safer home. USA is geographically nicely isolated from all of that. Of course, you've got what I call the dumpster fire of crypto. So there's a lot of money looking to get out of that. And so
what money is left?
What's that?
Is. I said, what money is left in
Totally.
the crypto space? In fact, I just saw that Coinbase hit a new low again today. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. I mean,
yeah,
I know some people made very good money there, and the smart money actually got out and waited for this most recent leg over the last, say, 4 to 6 months to sort of play out. It's been a very, very tumultuous last, say, 4 months for the crypto space, not the least of which is the most recent meltdown of FTX. Sam Bankman-Fried is being held in a penal colony. It's not even a prison. It's not even a prison. It's a penal colony.
You don't want to be in that place, man. Yeah, that's a bummer.
No. But he will be extradited to the United States, of course, and held responsible as he should be, because
as he should be.
He was doing all sorts of things with those billions of dollars. But eventually, I think that there will be new growth that comes from that space. It's really just a question of how that takes form. And I do think that blockchain technology is interesting, and it'll have to sort of reinvent itself in some capacity. And I know that we have some experts in that space among our client base and viewers. So it'll be interesting for sure. I think that ultimately the major institutions will have to get involved, and there's going to have to be some federal oversight there in order to bring people back into it. So, but that said, thanks for joining us today, Mark. As always, great job on producing The Insider. For those who don't know, Mark is moving on to another position, and so it's been really a lot of fun working with you, and grateful for all that you've done for us and the team in spearheading our efforts. So I want everybody to have a great holiday season, and we'll catch up with you after the new year. We have some interesting things coming from The Insider. We're going to continue it into 2023 with rotating guests that I think you'll really find interesting. So look forward to catching up. And if there's anything that we can do, you can always reach out to me here at 212-321-7111 or josh@rubinteam.com. Have a happy and healthy holiday season. Happy Hanukkah again. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year from all of us to all of you.